Hello, and welcome to Unweaving the Wheel, a podcast where we analyze and react to the episodes of Amazon Prime's Wheel of Time.
Intro music by Brandon Tolley.
I'm Z, and I haven't read The Wheel of Time.
I'm Gavin, and I'm a Wheel of Time superfan, and I've read it 4+ times.
We're going to be going into a discussion on the episode, hopefully gleaning some interesting notes and connections from my point of view and from Gavin's extensive knowledge. This is for episode 4, The Dragon Reborn.
Yeah, finally making it to episode 4. Real quick before we start going into the episode, I wanted to do a little bit of a PSA or a preamble, and I probably should have done this in earlier episodes, if not episode 1. But I wanted to talk about real quick that there's been a lot of discourse online about fans of the books and the discrepancies with the show and a lot of the different theming. And in that line, I just want to put out there that The Wheel of Time, the series, was written by a male author in a male-dominated genre that predominantly caters to a male audience. That isn't, the rule of thumb, but that's kind of how fantasy's been for a very long time, and it's beginning to change, but it's still working on it. So, I love The Wheel of Time. It might be my favorite book series of all time. That being said, while I think Robert Jordan did a good job of trying to write and give a good representation of female characters and women in general in his story, because of him just being a male writer, it being a male-dominated genre, and a book that appeals to the male power fantasy, there is inherently baked in, whether it was his intention or not, a level of misogyny. And with that being said, as well, when I'm giving my input on the books or the show, I identify as non-binary, but I tend to have more of a male bias. Right. And I just wanted to go ahead and put out there that I don't agree with, the misogynistic, characterization. That's just not how I think. And for me, it's been more part of world building, that it's just the way his world was built up.
Right.
And in nicer terms, the cultures of that world have a very old school approach to things. But that doesn't change the fact that it doesn't exactly treat or represent women appropriately as they should in today.
I understand.
I hope I phrased that right.
You're doing your best.
Yep, and, sure am.
We discussed this a little after, just for the listeners. we've finished the series. The whole series is out by the time we're recording this, and we've watched it. Our lives are busy. Leave us alone. We get to them when we get to them, you know. Hopefully with season 2, they won't just blast out all 3 episodes at once, and we don't have to play catch up weekly. But we're going to have an episode at the end of this just talking about the series as a whole, or the season 1 as a whole.
Yeah.
And I am more on the androgynous sides of things, but I don't really call myself non-binary, so I do see things more from the feminine point of view. There are certain things that you definitely kind of stand out a little, but I think everyone needs to keep in mind, especially as more and more internet services, I guess, things like Amazon, Netflix, whatever, they're pulling from books that were written in the 80s, 90s. I don't mean just Wheel of Time, but like they keep going further back in time to pull from sources
Right.
of things.
The source material is dated, and with that comes dated ideas.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's just something to keep in mind. And I think that's something we tend to forget because it's being introduced here and now. But that all being said, I think we could jump into episode 4.
Sounds good.
In this episode, we learn a little bit more about the false dragon and how powerful he is. Nynaeve is sus of everyone in the camp. Who can really blame her?
Accurate.
Egwene and Perrin are just keep on going along with the Tinkerers.
They're hanging out with the Tuatha.
Yeah, they're just chilling. And Rand and Matt follow Tom to a barn to sleep for the night. Hell then breaks loose for everyone except for Egwene and Perrin, who just keep chilling.
Yeah, they had
everyone else gets messed up.
Yeah, Egwene and Perrin kind of got a little bit more of a break this episode. A lot of the action was, I'd say most of the action was with Nynaeve, Lan, and Moraine. And then there was a little bit of action with Rand, Tom, and Matt. But yeah, Egwene and Perrin are just kind of hanging out.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit. I think I bring up what's going on with them very briefly.
Yeah.
Briefly. I can talk tonight. I'm not tired, and I haven't had a crazy day, so I'm blah, blah, blah. Anyway.
It is what it is. We're real people, like.
So this episode gives us some good political setup and a ton of magic lore. This was the episode where it really started to feel like I was beginning to understand how the magic worked and started to see a bit more about the greater world. We get to see the kingdom, or at least one of the kingdoms. There's multiple kingdoms, I think.
Yeah, there's
a lot.
The continent's littered with them.
Yeah. Which one thing I made this connection on my like 4th watch or whatever of this episode, but in the previous episode they talked about there's wars in the south, and I suddenly realized like, oh, this king dude might have something to do with that.
Yeah, specifically episode 1 when Rand makes it to the tavern and he's sitting down with Perrin and Matt. Perrin brings up, he says, they say there's a war going on in Gillidan. And so the opening scene with Logain is the siege of Gillidan.
Oh, and something that I really liked that this episode showed us was the magic of the false king or false dragon, false king, whoever, the false guy. So initially when I first started watching, I kind of was taking it like, oh, using magic makes them crazy, it just poisons their mind. And I kind of took it to be very subtle, or kind of just like, you touch it, you go crazy.
Right.
But in this, it is more like, oh, the magic is talking to this dude and making him crazy, which I thought was really interesting, that it's like, it's not just, oh, the magic makes you crazy because of reasons. It's like, no, we're literally showing you the magic itself is talking to these dudes. Or at least that's kind of how it came off with the shadowy figure talking to the
Right.
false dragon. I was
Uh,
kind of like, oh, it's literally the magic is making them go insane. It's not just their brain can't handle the magic, you know?
yeah, it's the scene Logain is using the power against the king of Gillidan.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk about this too because I thought it was really interesting. I like the way that they did this because he uses the power. So we've pretty much up until this point only seen the women, the Aes Sedai, use the one power, and it's been presented as kind of this white ethereal wisp kind of deal.
Right.
And the interesting thing that I liked about this was that when Logain uses the power, it starts off as that white wisp, and then there's the cloud of black ink that kind of
Yeah.
creeps up on it, and the tail end of the wisp, the white is still there, but you can clearly see like the corruption behind it.
Yes, and I found it fascinating that the almost the source of it is what turns into a person that's talking to him.
I thought that was interesting too, that they had an almost physical manifestation of the quote unquote madness.
And it could just be that it is just you touch the magic and you go crazy, and maybe that's it. But I really loved this interpretation of no, it's literally, it's like there's a demon in the magic talking to this guy. Like, even if that's not literally what is happening, I mean, it might be, but just
but that imagery is powerful.
The imagery is beautiful. I just was like, damn, this is some dark implications.
The
was really
the other
great.
thing. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was also just gonna say the creepy swirly magic people, swirly shadow magic beings, good and disturbing. There's very few times this show has gotten me scared, but this wasn't scary, but it was definitely off-putting.
They were very unsettling. The sound design and kind of the way they play that off. The thing that I wanted to bring up was I like this this example of male channelers being touched by madness. And the thing that I wanted to point out was in reference to mental health and mental health disorders. I've been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and am currently working on a treatment plan for it. But the interesting thing that I found was a parallel in this is that when these voices in Logain's head, or these physical manifestations of the madness, are talking to him, they're instilling a paranoia in him, because they're whispering to him saying he can't be trusted, he'll never follow you, that kind of thing. And then they follow up and say that he will betray you. Everyone always betrays you. They won't understand you, just like your sister. And it's that's a very real visceral thing, in my opinion, because a lot of the times, at least in my experience with mental health, that when you start having depressive or paranoia or anxious thoughts, your brain takes negative things and spins a web of logic around it, so that you can tell yourself that those feelings are valid when they may not be warranted at all. So it's
Right.
that idea of that they're not just blatantly saying like, no, nobody will believe you. It's twisting in that idea of like, oh, your sister betrayed you, even your own sister. So why would anyone else hesitate? And it kind of weaves that logic into it to kind of validate his paranoid thoughts. And I don't know, I just found that very visceral and like a very eerily accurate representation of mental health.
Yeah.
So
I can
that
see that.
I wanted to talk about that. It was phenomenal and creepy.
One thing I wanted to point out real quick has nothing to do with your excellent discussion on mental health. Which, by the way, if you want us to do another podcast about mental health, we got that. We've got plenty of content for that one.
Right?
Left shoulders really take a beating in this show so far.
Yeah.
I mean, we have every single episode a left shoulder has been hurt. Someone, I'm just saying, someone has a vendetta, or the makeup artist is right-handed.
True.
And just left shoulders were easy to put makeup on. I'm just saying.
Casual theorizing as well. Left shoulder, hearts on the left side. That's what they're shooting for, kind of deal. If you wanted like a real life explanation. Saying. But yeah, no, I get what you're saying. There's a weird amount of like people getting their left shoulder like impaled or slashed.
Yeah, there's just been a lot of damage to left shoulders, and it's. I feel like maybe they could have mixed it up and had someone get stabbed in the stomach. I don't know. It's fine. Whatever. It's nitpicking.
I mean,
there, but,
Perrin scraped his leg.
Was it his left leg?
I'm trying to think now.
I don't know. It doesn't.
No, I think it was his right leg.
Anyway, something else I wanted to talk about was Nynaeve, and how I know you mentioned at the very beginning of this episode about, this was written by a male author in a male-dominated genre at the time. But I really appreciate how the show is handling her, and how, especially the actress. I'm going to shout the actress out. Zoe Robbins. Shout out to Zoe Robbins for her acting, because I feel like Nynaeve is a really nicely complex character. We get to see that she's super suspicious because she's from the Two Rivers, and they're taught that anyone who ain't from the Two Rivers ain't trustworthy. Hell, I don't even think they trust everyone from the Two Rivers.
Yeah, they're stubborn, skeptical folk. They know a very particular way of life, and anything beyond that, obviously they are wary of.
Two Rivers is suspicious of Two Rivers. Anyway, while we're seeing her suspicion and she's kind of keeping herself detached from the rest of the camp, you also can see that she desires companionship, that she's lonely. And I just get the feeling that even in the Two Rivers, she wasn't 100% comfortable there, as she was adopted and brought in by that other lady, the old wisdom. Yep. So we see that even though she's lived there the whole time, she's
kind of had a outcast feeling a majority of her life.
Yeah, and so I think that's actually what pulls her to Lan, because they start getting closer, and she kind of can sense, I think, that even though Lan has this companionship with all the other warders, he kind of feels like an outsider too. Not just he feels like an outsider, but to Nynaeve, I think she can spot, oh, he doesn't match up with the rest of these people either. I wonder why that is. And I think that's kind of what lets those two connect.
Yeah, there's like a common ground there for them.
I wasn't sure if I was shipping it, but then the sweet little moment where he translates her parents' last words to her happens, and I was just like, okay, this cute. Y'all are cute.
That was a really interesting moment. But I'll have to talk more about that in the book portion.
Right.
of the show. But yeah, that was a very interesting moment overall.
Yeah, I also feel like it's kind of setting up, because it's from the king of Manethian, said to his wife.
Manetherin.
Manetherin. Dang it! I had it written out and I took my shot and then messed it up. Manetherin, right?
Manetherin.
Manetherin. Okay.
Yep,
Oh,
there
God.
you go.
Anyway, that kingdom.
That's why I'm here.
Yes, I know. It's fascinating to me because that was the original kingdom of the two rivers. So I'm kind of sitting here like, maybe even though she's technically, like, she came from outside of the two rivers, maybe she's a descendant of someone from the two rivers' old kingdom.
Yeah, it's interesting.
There was just this little, I just wanted to note that. So we get all that. Sorry about that cough. We get all that kind of moments with Lan and Nynaeve, and a lot of this episode we get interactions between all the Aes Sedai sisters, and they called them sisters and have said sisters, but goddamn if they don't act like sisters too.
Yeah, that's yeah, it's so all the all women of the White Tower are referred to as sisters. All Aes Sedai
Yes,
are
they
sisters
established
to
that
each other. Yeah.
one of the previous episodes.
And I really like that. You're right. It is like, obviously I'm a dude. I have an older brother, and it's a completely different dynamic. But there is that in general, I can sense that like there almost is like a sibling.
Oh yes.
Feeling in their talking to each other, and the varying degrees of like appreciation and pettiness, and like just the whole gambit of it. It's very familial.
Yes. And I didn't have a sister or anything growing up, but I had a lot of friends who were very close as sisters, and I know how they interacted with their sisters. So I was just watching all the cattiness go down, and I was like, this is like angry sisters who have all been stuck in a house together for too long. And even if they've split and gone their ways. And I thought it was kind of interesting because, like, the green Aes Sedai, both of them, I feel like, we're looking at Moraine and going, I don't trust you. I know you're up to something, but I at least respect you. And then all the red Aes Sedai were just straight up giving me mean girl vibes.
Yeah, I really like how they kind of what's the word for it? They're very quickly establishing like the temperaments of the different Ajas that like, and kind of like the internal politics that go with that.
Yeah, but you can't tell me that you couldn't hear the Aes Sedai or the red Aes Sedai going, on Wednesdays we wear red.
Dude, they wear red 24/7.
You can't sit with us. Or you can, Nynaeve. Come sit with us, Nynaeve.
The Red Sisters are interesting. They're an interesting bunch.
Yeah.
Just the whole Aja is interesting to me.
Yeah, and it's mean girl vibes, sister vibes, more of Moraine being an outcast, which might be why her and Lan are connected. Like, even among the Aes Sedai, this is the first time we kind of see her surrounded with other Aes Sedai.
Yeah.
And they're all kind of looking at her sideways, like, what are you doing here, Moraine? We don't. I don't know about this, Moraine.
The Blue Sisters are kind of they're interesting because they in general seek justice and for the greater good, but they're also well known as spy masters, that they keep tabs on everything throughout the world because they're known to have an intricate spy network where they know people everywhere they go, and someone always has something to say. Right. And so I think that's where a lot of that, or that's where you're beginning to see that wariness of Moraine, because they know it's that thing where like they know she's up to something, they just don't know what that is.
Right. Um, I also wanted to do a quick little shout out to the poly gay threesome thing. I
Oh
was
yeah.
impressed they went there, but also at the same time, Game of Thrones just straight up had incest in it multiple times across
Yeah.
multiple relationships. So I'm really glad they just were like, you know what? If Game of Thrones can do incest, we
Yeah.
can do a cute little polycule and it'll
I
be fine.
I want to talk about that more in
In the
the
book area,
book
yeah, yeah.
portion, but yeah, I really like how this area, like this episode has been a very like expositional episode where there's still action in it, but a lot of this is learning about or getting
Mm-hmm.
more in depths into like the politics and what characters are thinking. And I just
Yeah,
really liked overall getting to learn more about the Aes Sedai, and like specifically in this episode you learn quite a bit about the relationships between Aes Sedai and their warders.
right. I
And I think they
do,
just did a really good job of compiling a lot of information in a very
yes.
neat and digestible way.
Yeah. I do want to say though, you said exposition, and I think it more is world building. I think exposition kind of
Yeah,
comes with the connotation of like being
a
directly
beginning.
told something.
True.
Not even a
Yeah,
beginning, it's more the statement of like the red Aes Sedai are mean girls. That's
right. No,
exposition.
you're right. This is more a little bit on the subtler side of world building. That's
Yeah,
You're
it's
right
more
in
the
that.
subtlety, it's more the introduction. Yeah, I didn't feel very exposition that. It felt very natural, like,
Yeah,
okay,
it was
Nynaeve is now meeting
organic.
everyone. Yeah, it was very well done. And um I did like that in this episode we got to see a lot more of the physical magic bits. Um
Yeah.
it really just made me think that Robert Jordan was a fan of string theory, which I could probably make a whole episode about that, honestly.
I mean, fair. Again,
um
something I can talk about more in the book section, but that was actually so going into this show based on the previews, I was very skeptical
mhm.
because in the previews, it shows Moraine using her magic against the Trollocs and the Two Rivers, and I felt that initial showing of it was a little bit cheesy the first time I watched it, at least in the preview, and getting to see more of it in action in this episode, it's done well.
Yeah,
I think
and
it's visualized
I will say
well.
I will say that the first episode it does lean a little cheesy on the
It,
magic use.
there's a lot of intense choreography involved that kind of
That and even
added a
just
weird layer.
the way they use it, and I feel like in this episode, specifically the battle scene at the end, they did so much better. It wasn't
Yeah,
too cheesy. It was also the green Aes Sedai they don't fuck around.
I mean,
I
there's a reason why they're called the Battle Aja.
Yeah, no, it became very apparent because like even when we saw Moraine doing the fighting in the first episode, it was very like I'm gonna pull this wall down onto these Trollocs. Green Aes Sedai are like, shit's blowing up.
Yeah, no, I
We're
really
just gonna
liked.
explode things.
There was a really cool effect because towards the end of the episode, uh, the King of Gillidan and his soldiers come for Logain. There's a hailstorm of arrows that's like the preemptive shot,
Hmm.
and if I remember right, it's Ayanna Sedai. She uses the one power to catch the arrows in the air and hold
Yeah.
them perfectly still, and then when the soldiers charge in, she turns them around and flings them back down at them. And I just thought
Yes.
that was one of the coolest things. I was like, oh, that was badass.
Yes, it was awesome, and I liked the moment where she is like charging up a spell, and then she just quickly throws her hand, and it's just like 3 fast explosions.
Yeah, and there's
And I
these
just
cool
was like,
effects
mwah.
with a lot of the explosions and the fight in the forest. There's a cool effects where you can see it's like a fissure going through the ground, culminating
Mm-hmm.
into a final explosion of like, you know, kind
Yes.
of like rocky earth magic of like, I'm creating an earthquake specifically for you.
Yes. And whoever was doing the practicals on those, I liked it.
uh,
Good
it
job.
it all came off
Definitely,
very well.
definitely glad they did a little more practical in this fight. And I assume the reason they didn't do practical in the first episode with the Trollocs was because of the Trollocs.
Yeah, I mean
Because
there
it would
was
just
already a lot of
CGI happening.
practical
Yeah.
and CGI happening, and mixing the two can be very difficult.
Yeah. If done well, looks amazing. But definitely more difficult and probably more time required than what was needed to get these episodes out. But I
Yeah.
just really wanted to like point out the magic, seeing the magic, especially when we see the barrier holding him. Um, this episode was a bit more where I started to go like, oh, weaving.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big
Like I
phrase
knew,
used in the magic, is that they're weaving the one power.
yes, but this was a little more like, ooh, it's like literally
Yep.
weaving. I felt dumb, but that's like where I started to really get it. So I really loved that. Um, I want to switch gears a little because we're talking so much about the Aes Sedai. I'm going to switch off for a second and talk about our other 2 groups.
Oh,
I
before you do that, can I point out something that I noticed?
Sure.
So with the Aes Sedai groups, an interesting thing that I caught was, you know, we're learning about the internal politics of the White Tower and the Aes Sedai, and there's this really subtle comment that's made. I can't remember her name at the moment, but the green sister that heals Moraine
Mm-hmm.
is having a conversation with Elida, the head red sister,
Mm-hmm.
and they're talking about how Elida is essentially trying to persuade everyone in the camp that they need to gentle Logain before taking him to the tower.
Right.
Um, and so the Green Sister makes a statement along the lines of all men who are to be gentled are to be brought and tried at the White Tower before any action is taken. And you should be the one reminding me of that, not I to you. The interesting thing about that is that that's a command from the Amerlin, the head of the Aes Sedai.
Mm-hmm.
And this also shows that Elida has already disobeyed the Amerlin,
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
in
from the
episode
first
1 she
episode.
gentles a man out in the wild. She did not take him in for trial,
Ooh, and Moraine knows this.
and Moraine knows this because she watched it. And I just thought that that was a very subtle, like, it was
Mm.
just a very interesting little, you know, they're doing all this like politics and internal things, and there's just this like one, it's probably like a 5 to 10 second scene,
Right.
and it just opens up this avenue of Elida's already
Is
taking
it
matters
Elida
into
or
her own hand.
Lilindrin?
Alon, my brain is
Yeah, it's
breaking.
Lilindrin.
Leandrin. Sorry, there's another Aes Sedai named Elida that I. There's a
Get
lot
your
of them.
get your Sedais in order.
So,
It's fine.
so say the correct name again so it sticks in my head.
Leandrin.
Leandrin. Leandrin Sedai So retcon all of that for everything that I said. We now have this moment where we've seen that Leandrin has disobeyed her orders.
Yeah, at least
At
once.
least once, if not multiple times. So that was a nice little small thing that I noticed.
Yeah, and I wonder how, just because now you pointed that out, I'm thinking about when Tom talks about, this
Yeah,
was
if we
either
want
this
to move
episode or
over
last
to
episode.
Matt and Rand and
Yeah, just
Tom.
real quick. But Tom talks about how his nephew got
Yep.
gentled. And I'm sitting here like, I don't remember him saying that his nephew got a trial.
No, he actually I remember that conversation. His nephew wasn't taken to the tower. They
Mm.
gentled him on the spot. Now, the exception to the rule is that
Oh, if they're threatening
if
the
they're
life.
threatening,
That's right.
yeah, so if they're, being directly attacked, they're allowed to take drastic measure, as in using the power as a weapon, gentling, etc. And if I remember right, when Tom was talking about his nephew, is that he
Mm,
was hurling a boulder without his hands and he was already starting to lose it.
got you.
So I assume he may have been threatening, but that does raise the question of how legitimate was, his nephew's gentling, and how that plays into Tom's mistrust of the Aes Sedai.
Yeah. Um, the only other thing I have about the Matt and Rand situation is you can tell how hard Matt is fighting the knife influence because you hear its creepy whispers throughout the thing, and then the
Yep.
little girl comes up to him and he immediately switches to older brother Matt. Um, and just again, a moment in which I was severely disturbed was the fucking I see you moment. Holy shit.
Dude, that was
I
so
think I
I love the progression that they've made with Matt, of like very clearly showing like a decay in his health and his mental state.
mm-hmm.
I think that's all been done really well. And then that whole scene of Rand has another dream
Mm-hmm.
with the man with the eyes like embers, and when he wakes up, rushes into the house and finds Matt standing there, and the family's been slaughtered. And that's just like a harrowing scene, because your first instinct, like, you see the bodies and you see Matt, and your first thought immediately is, oh my
Oh
god, did Matt
no,
kill these
Matt.
people? Like,
I said
like,
literally in my notes, if enough people care, I will release my my hilarious, I think they're funny notes. But I'm pretty sure one of my notes for oh here they go. Um oh no, spooky dream time. Spooky screaming face man. Oh, oh no. Oh Matt. Like each of those is just a bullet point. And then the
yeah,
fade jump scare got me good. Holy crap, that was
yeah,
a great moment. Whoever put that in there, that was like I genuinely
that
jumped when
was
I saw
just a
the
really
fade.
good scene. And
Oh,
then
Jesus.
yeah, and then we have like a brief little, we get like a little bit of a combat scene between the Fade and Tom, and
That was
Matt and Rand kind of just book it.
fuck off. Who can blame him? But I did like that this excuse me, and I can't remember if you talked about it in episode 3 or this episode, but I did like that, we're kind of shown Tom as a bard. And this is where I went, oh, this dude ain't a bard, he's a rogue.
Yeah, a little bit, a little bit.
Um, I just kind of, it was kind of cool, like, oh, you call yourself a glee man, but really, you're you're a rogue assassin. Okay, I got it. I see you. I see you.
Yeah, I like
I
the
got
way
it.
that they're setting up his character, and I don't remember the exact words that he says, but to kind of paraphrase, um he says, we call ourselves Gleeman because it's a silly name that nobody will suspect. And he says there's nothing more dangerous than a man who knows the past.
So
And
I went to the spot in the episode and he says we call ourselves Gleeman because a silly name makes us less frightening. That was a good
right.
moment too. They said that, I was like, ooh.
And I like that buildup of this character, this idea that he's this person who's too smart for his own good and very self-aware of it. Like, he knows that his knowledge of the world is very threatening to most people, or, you know, and that it's this idea that he has to play the fool so so that he will not bring unwanted attention to himself. I like that idea in his character.
Yeah. And it just makes it all the better when he starts like fighting like a badass.
Oh man, dude, his knife throws are amazing.
Oh, it's so good. I also love how the older characters in the show, like Rand's dad, and I almost called him Daddy Rand again. And Tom, like, they see a bad guy. There is no shock. There's no awe.
There's no hesitation.
Moment. It's
They're just like, no, it has to. Yeah, this thing has to die.
Whereas, like, and I like this characterization because the younger characters don't do that. The younger characters are like, oh fuck.
Yeah,
you know?
There's always hesitation, and
I don't even think it's hesitation. It's just they're so shocked at what they're seeing. They, you know, it takes them a moment to figure it out, you know, figure out what they're even looking at. But the older characters, like, we've been around the block, we've seen some fucked up shit.
Yeah, it's really
no
interesting because, like, you know, presumably, like, the quote-unquote most, like, evil or sinister thing that the younger characters have seen is, like a sheep stealer. That's, like, the most evil thing that they know about. And now there's monsters and dark friends that have no qualms about drawing swords and threatening your life immediately.
And they you know, they take a moment because they're shocked, and meanwhile the older character, I just really appreciate that. You know, I feel like in certain shows, and especially in TV a lot, younger characters forget they're young, or writers forget that their characters are young. So you'll get,
that
like,
they don't have that world experience.
Or you'll get like a 12-year-old that talks like an adult.
Yeah.
And as someone who has done camps and taught, you know, a variety of ages, it's like, okay, yeah, there plenty of kids can be very articulate at a young age, but they're still act and say things like a child would. And so I really appreciate when there's that, like, you know, these noobs are scared for a second when the Fade jump scares them.
Right.
You know, whereas the older character just immediately starts fighting. I really appreciate them doing that. It's subtle, but I think it really makes the characters more believable, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree completely on that.
But that's all I've really got to say about Matt and Rand. I was going to talk about the Egwene and Perrin side of things.
Okay.
Next. Kind of like I mentioned, we have the fighting characters, we have the political characters, and then we have Egwene and Perrin, who I think I said they were the magical characters last time because of the wolf stuff, but I'm kind of leaning towards the philosophy characters.
Yeah, I could see that.
Especially Perrin right now. I mean, maybe Egwene later, but I grew up watching Star Trek, so I really enjoyed this philosophical debate that Perrin is getting into with the Tinkerers. And
yeah,
I just loved the line. I loved it so much I pulled it out as a quote. What greater revenge against violence than peace? What greater revenge against death than life? And that was from the female tinker talking about how her daughter got murdered. And with the Way of the Leaf, she made the decision, like, I could go after them and get my revenge and be murderous.
Yeah, I think she says,
But
he's like, I stood there for what felt like ages, deciding whether or not I wanted to pull the spirit of my daughter's chest to hunt down the men that did this to her.
yeah,
And then I walked away, and Perrin asks, why did you walk away? And she says, for revenge.
that's where she gets, yeah. Or he's asking, who are you doing this for? And she's explaining, like, doing it so the next time I have my daughter, or next time my daughter's spirit gets churned out of the wheel again, maybe she'll have a better life.
Right.
It really just kind of pushes this, like, interesting dynamic, which I'll get to in a second, that people have, and this interesting relationship people have with the wheel and the knowledge of the wheel. But I wanted to point out, like, love how you can see the hurt and the anger in her face when she's talking about this. You can see that this still pains her so much, even though she has arguably come to a conclusion about her daughter's death. She still is just so torn up about it. And I find it really interesting because they understand that, souls get popped in and out of the wheel. But I really love the human touch of, like, it doesn't matter that they know this person will be alive again at some point. It still hurts.
Yeah, it's
to
like
have lost them.
the like theory or idea that essentially everyone's soul is immortal doesn't change the fact that in this life it matters what happens. Each life matters regardless of what comes next or what came before,
which I think is a very interesting philosophy for a TV show to bring up. I wouldn't expect a TV fantasy show to be talking about the immortality of the soul and the grievance of people who know that immortal soul.
Right.
But I also feel like in other shows that have a known afterlife, death is more an inconvenience.
Right.
It doesn't.
It is an interesting thing.
Like Supernatural, for anyone who's seen Supernatural, the main characters die about 500 times. And so anytime a main character is truly killed off, I don't feel emotional about it. I'm just kind of annoyed at this point. Like, even when they're written out of the show for good, like when the actor leaves the show and has left Supernatural.
But like their death no longer like holds an impact because because of the way this is set up that it's just kind of a minor inconvenience.
Exactly. But I feel like this show does something so cool to me, is that it's still impactful because it hurts the other characters, even though we know their immortal soul is fine in the Wheel of Time.
Yeah,
it's still so painful for them, and I just feel like most other shows wouldn't go here.
It's the idea that like their soul is immortal, but because it's this like intricate balance of like I know their soul is immortal, but what they mean to me is important now. And even though I know that in the future, we'll be alive again in some way, that doesn't change the fact that now it hurts.
Right. That's what I was really getting at, was that that was the part that I don't see many other shows going for. And I think it also comes to a bit of nature versus nurture. Even though their core is the same, like they grow up in a different time, so they are different inherently. I mean, that's true of anything. I did like that they make an emphasis on the connections that the people have while they're alive, and so it's like in a different show, I feel like again it would just be they get churned out, no one cares that they died. It's like, oh
Right.
well, I'll see you the next time around.
Yeah.
Whereas in this one, it's like,
catch you around next time.
Damn, that hurt. The last thing I think we have to talk about is the last like 15 minutes of the episode where just everything goes to hell very quickly.
Yeah, this is the big climax to the episode.
I will say I saw an interesting little theory.
Oh.
Because what appears to happen is it appears that the kingdoms, the false dragons, kingdom friends arrive,
right. The soldiers,
and distracts the Aes Sedai long enough for him to break out of their imprisonment.
Right.
And I saw someone say, like, well, what if he didn't really break out of the imprisonment? Maybe Moraine dropped her part of the magic hold. And I don't think that's what happened. Hold on, I was trying to...
Well, just to clarify, when they're in the cave, when everything strikes, it's Leandrin and the Green sister, Moraine, isn't there.
Yes, that was what I was going to try and say. Like, she's not there, so I don't think she was projecting anything. What I think happened is that he was never really contained.
Okay.
I think he was biding his time to get to the White Tower or get close to the White Tower and let his army catch up. I think he could have probably broken out anytime he really wanted to, but he was letting the army catch up with them.
Interesting.
That is my theory. Kind of like I've walked very large dogs in my life. I've walked dogs that are around 120 pounds. These smart fuckers, these smart dogs, what they'll do is they'll walk nice, so you hold the leash a little looser, and then they'll bolt at the moment they think you've given them enough slack.
Gotcha.
So I think that's more what happened here, is he wasn't quite pushing as hard as he could have against their magic prison for him, and he waited for just the right moment to push out.
Honestly, for me, I think it's just, everyone got distracted, heat of the moment, shit happens. Like, that's kind of the idea that I took it at face value, essentially.
Right.
That, like, well, shit hit the fan and people lost focus, and he took advantage of that.
Like we said earlier, everything goes to hell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But a couple... Oh, go ahead.
Last thing was R.I.P. Kareen.
Kareen, that's her name.
Karina, I think.
Karina? Kareen?
It doesn't have an A at the end.
Okay.
But, R.I.P. Then we got the Peter Quill moment.
Yeah, I was literally going to make the same joke where it's very much a Star-Lord moment of, like, just too angry to think properly.
Yeah.
But, God. I mean, I feel so bad for Steppen, though.
I know.
That was brutal. I do, as much as it sucks for Kareen, I do like, as part of like the world building aspect that we were talking about earlier, is that this also builds on the relationship between the Aes Sedai and their warders, because we've heard it mentioned in passing that warders feel what their Aes Sedai feel and vice versa. So this shows what happens when an Aes Sedai dies, what happens to their warder. And there's that very clear moment in the midst of combat where it looks like he like got hit in the chest with an arrow because he's so shocked by her death, and then his, you know, unconsolable rage at Logain.
And I know we made the Peter Quill joke, and this is more a jab at Infinity War than anything, but I found it more believable when Stepan loses it. Like, when he did it, I was like, oh, Stepan, no. But like when Peter Quill lost it, I was like, you idiot. Like, but it was more, of course, 2 seconds later, I no longer had any sympathy for him because of what his action resulted in, but it was all fine in the end. So I'm back to being like, oh, Stepan, no.
Right.
But when Lan's throat got cut,
that, yeah, the whole, like, when everyone in the room gets absolutely, like, wrecked, like, everyone is on the brink of death. That was, that was a very, that was a very strange, like, I had no words, like, when that happened, I was like, that was like I was on the edge of my seat, like, oh, God, what? How? What? Like, what's gonna happen? Like, everyone is bleeding out and actively dying right now.
Yeah, like, I think Moraine even finally someone got stabbed in the stomach.
Right. Yeah, no, there was because it was the shrapnel from Stepan's axes just like shreds everyone. And then the Nynaeve has her moment.
Oh, what a glorious moment.
It was.
I was so
epic.
happy.
It gave me goosebumps.
It was so good. It just, her hair whipping around, the braids, the also, side note, real cute look with the braids down. Loved it. I was like, oh, that's cute. But just the light and the shining and the healing everyone AoE.
Yeah, it was just an awesome moment. Like that was just a truly epic moment. I loved everything about that, and it gave me the goosebumps.
Yeah.
Oh, I did have a thing to say about that though. There was this really clever thing that I noticed that so at the towards the beginning of the episode when where the first time it cuts to Rand, Matt, and Tom. Matt and Rand are talking in the woods as they're coming up to this barn, and Matt is talking about Moraine, and he says, Moraine said that the dragon is reborn and it can be any of the 5 of you. And then he goes, there's you, me, Perrin, and Elaine. Who's the 5th? And at this point, the originals... Oh, go ahead.
The Dark Friend was the one who said it was one of you 5.
Yeah, one of you 5. I'm sorry. Dark Friend.
Okay. There's a fiend, too.
Yeah, you're right. It was not Moraine. It was the Dark Friend. And so, you know, Matt and Rand and Perrin and Egwene, they have no idea that Nynaeve is in the picture yet, so that's not even a thought in their mind. But I love how that question is posed of who's the 5th. We have this whole arc about Logain, and then at the very end of the episode, Nynaeve has this explosion of power, basically making it so that she's the 5th contender. And I just loved that telegraph from the beginning of the episode and answering it right at the end.
Yeah.
I thought that was really clever.
Just, you know, regardless, such a cool moment. Such a great moment. Just gives you chills. Like, full-blown power mode. Absolutely loved it.
Oh,
And then we get to see, yeah, the moment. I'm stuck on Nynaeve's moment. Okay, I love
yeah.
Nynaeve. She's one of my faves. Um, and I think partially it's the writing, but I think a big part of it is the actress who just like
She's
her
she's doing
little
a great job.
touches, the little looks she does. You know, I just loved that moment for Nynaeve. And then we got the moment of the gentling, which was cool as
Yep.
well. And that was a really interesting moment for me to see them like literally rip this like magic out of him.
Yeah, that was I liked the physicality of that, where, because presumably, like, this is all magic, and in theory all of this could just be invisible,
Yeah.
but I like everything that they've done to give a physical representation of what the magic is doing and how it's affecting people. And so that the ripping of the magic out of him, and there's that really, it happens for a split second on the wide shot when they gentle him, and then all the black magic spews from his chest. It's
Mm-hmm.
really interesting because it's coming from the front of him, but it almost forms like this, like almost like black angel wings
Yeah.
thing. And I don't know if that was like intentional symbolism or whatever. I just thought it looked cool that there was this like just kind of explosion that it looked like wings.
Yeah, no, I like that too. Really love the way they're showing the magic. Again, I feel like the first couple episodes it was a little awkward, but the more they're leaning into the kind of wispiness of it.
Yeah, they've
One cool
definitely
little
cleaned it up.
Yeah. One little cool little contrast I wanted to do is there's a shot of Leandrin, and it almost looks like as the magic is kind of wisping around her, it looks like she's smoking, like she's giving off magic at this
Yeah.
point. But
um
then when you look at the very next shot is the magic coming off of the false dragon, Logain, and it looks like the magic is fading off of him. Like it's
yeah,
slipping off of him. It cannot touch him anymore. And I just really loved like the contrast between the shot of like the magic is still emanating from Leandrin. Like it's
but
still a
then
part of her,
fading
but
from
then
Logain.
fading and slipping away from Logain. I really liked that way of showing that like when you are gentle, magic cannot touch you.
Yeah.
Um,
I liked how you mentioned that it's almost like the magic is burning off of her, and that's the comment that Moraine makes before the reinforcements show up. Is that Moraine says, Leandrin, you're using too much of the power. You're going to burn out. And then Leandrin kind of has her moment where she says, I don't care. He killed our sister, and
yeah.
just keeps raging forward. And so I think the idea that like the magic is like peeling off of her like smoke is like that she was that close to killing
Mm,
herself, like self-immolating with magic.
yeah. Really just so much symbolism in this episode. So well done.
Yeah,
A lot came out of this.
very solid episode.
Last thing I have is shout out to Lance. Oh fuck, I was dying face.
Yeah, the shock and awe of survival.
Yeah. Just like he just like sits up like touching his throat like, "Oh my god." I don't know why, but like it was a really serious moment. But that face cracked me up. I just started giggling.
Pretty good.
Um, that's more a me issue. I'm sure you know. I know they didn't intend for that to be funny, but to me it was absolutely hilarious.
Right. Like in retrospect, after you've digested the how intense the moment is, just the literal face that he makes is funny.
Mm-hmm. I think we're ready for the book portion. Good God, we've been talking forever.
Yeah.
That was a lot to go through.
Yeah, and so we're sitting at a little bit over an hour. So I'm gonna try and be succinct, but I will offer a fair warning. I think episodes to come are gonna be lengthy in general, just because we're getting to a point in the show where there are a lot of things happening and a lot of things to talk about, and it's going to be difficult to contain all of that in a shorter period of time. Gonna try and keep things concise, but just, fair warning, there's a lot to digest.
There really is. You know what's funny, viewers? We initially thought this would be a 30 to 40 minute podcast.
Oh yeah, no, we thought this was gonna be quick and snappy. Oh boy, how we were wrong.
Yeah, turns out we like to talk.
So into the book stuff. This is an interesting episode to talk about in regards to the book, because there are elements and ideas and events from the book that are very similar to what happens in this episode. But realistically, this episode is a complete divergence from the book. The events of this episode don't necessarily happen, or this isn't how the book plays out in this portion of the story.
Right.
So it's a weird, it's a little weird to do a comparison. I will say it was interesting to get some like background information and like characterization of Logain, full name Logain Ablar. In the books, later on in the story, you learn more about him, and he becomes more of a scene character. But as far as the Eye of the World, he's kind of almost talked about in passing, and he's physically seen by the characters like once.
Right.
And that's about it.
You telling me a little bit about like the slight. I remember you telling me that this episode was where things started to really diverge.
Yeah, and it's interesting because this is the halfway point in the show, and so this is where things start taking more of a significant churn from the books. There's still things that are part of the book, obviously, but this is where the show kind of starts to pave its own path of the story that it wants to tell, which, personally I'm okay with. I know it's a contentious thing among the fans of the books on where the show is going, but personally I'm okay with it. But I am always interested in the little things that they put here and there that are still parts of the book or references or what they have taken from the book to inspire the scenes that they did. So I thought it was interesting to see Logain and have that more knowledge about the madness and male channeling, because you don't get a lot of that information in the book. In the book, it's the information you're given is men who channel go crazy, so nobody likes them. That's kind of all you get.
What a summary.
Yeah, realistically, that's kind of what you get. And then, like, when you hear about Logain, they're like, there's a man called Logain, and he's waging a war in Gillidan, and he's claimed himself to be the Dragon Reborn. And that's kind of all you get for a while with Logan. So it was interesting to see that. I don't know what the show's plans are for who's important or what elements of the story they're going to use, but there was a introduction of a character that is very important to the book's story. Very long way down the road within the series. Like the last 4 or 5 books is where this person becomes relevant, so to speak. And that's the introduction of Ayanna Sedai. And she was the other green sister that was prominent, other than Corinne.
Okay.
Cool. So yeah, I won't really go into more detail on that because that's like an end game thing, and I don't know what they're gonna do with it. So just wanted to point out in the books she's important down the road.
Okay.
There's a really cool reference in the scenes with Matt, Rand, and Tom when the little girl comes out to talk to Matt to give him a loaf of bread and tell him that when they're done, dinner's ready, kind of thing.
Right.
She has her little doll, and she wants to give it to Matt. Is like, here, you can have my doll. She protects me during the night. So you can have it to protect you. And he's like, oh, I can't take that from you. She's like, oh, I've got other dolls. She mentions what the doll's name is. And she's like, this is Brigida. And that's a really interesting reference to the book, because in the lore of the Wheel of Time, there's kind of a set of legendary people, like legendary heroes that people of times gone that just their names have been retained throughout history.
Right.
Similar in a vein to the dragon, it's just people of great renown. And so Brigida, I can't remember her official last name at the moment, but her most common nickname was Brigida Silverbow. And she was kind of a legendary archer that fought in wars and was known for her complete mastery over the bow. One of the most accurate marksmen, and she was known for having this very intricate silver bow. And I just thought that was a really cool reference to that character. And you learn more about Brigida in the books, but I just thought it was a really interesting reference that this little girl has a doll of one of the legendary heroes. Other things that I wanted to get into, because it's a big divergence, essentially Egwene and Perrin's situation is kind of faithful to the books. They spend a bit of time with the Tinkers, and Matt, Tom, and Rand are similar in a way. Because I talked about it before, but in the books, Tom Maryland is there from the start. He was in the Two Rivers and fled with them. And then during the separation after Shadar Logoth, it was Tom, Matt, and Rand. And so from there in the books, they take a riverboat and they end up in a town called Whitebridge. And in that town is when they are attacked by the Fade, and Tom fights the Fade, and Matt and Rand run away. And then that's like the correlation there. So it's kind of like different timing and different setting, but that's a same story beat.
Right.
And then The interesting thing with Perrin and Egwene is that they spend time with the Tinkers. And I wanted to draw attention to, I talked about in the first episode, and I've brought it up a couple of times, the symbolism of the hammer versus the axe with Perrin.
Mm-hmm.
And that hammer being the life of peace and a craftsman, and the axe being the life of violence and fighting. And there's this interesting moment when they're with the Tuathalan, that he's fixing one of their wheels and he's using a hammer to beat the axle back onto the cart. And you know, the woman thanks him, and he's like, "Oh, it's no trouble. Anyone could do it. Anyone can use a hammer." And she says, "But it suits you. It brings you peace." And so that's leaning more into that symbolism.
Right.
And the other interesting theory, or thing, not theory, is that there's an absence of a character in the show that is in the books. And I understand because of the changes they've already made. So there's this character named Elias Mentura, and Perrin and Egwene meet Elias before they meet the Tinkers.
Okay.
And so in the books, Perrin and Egwene have an encounter with White Cloaks, and after that encounter is when they meet Elias Mentura. And Elias kind of serves as the accelerant in the changes in Perrin's life. I'm gonna hold off on some details.
Okay.
Because not everything is concrete in the show as of this episode. So I don't want to breach into potential spoiler area. But Elias Mentura is important in like the acceleration in Perrin's story. And so Elias is who leads Perrin and Egwene to the Tinkers, because he's friends with the Tinkers. And
instead we had wolves.
Right. And so the interesting thing with that in the book is that Elias kind of serves as the counter argument to the Tinkers. So instead of Perrin just learning from the Tinkers and kind of quietly pondering to himself and that kind of thing, in the books you have this direct juxtaposition of that the Tinkers live this life of peace, that they will do no harm. And Elias is more of the mindset of you do what you have to do to survive. And, you know, he doesn't directly condone violence, but he offers the kind of, like the Tinkers are kind of an idealistic take on the world, and Elias is more of a realist, where he's just like, you have to do what you have to do, and if that means defending yourself and doing violence upon others, I see no issue into that. And so that gives Perrin more of a two sides of the coin that he can look at and debate with.
I wonder if they'll, like, in later seasons maybe start doing that.
Yeah, I'm very interested what they do with Perrin and his internal and exterior struggles, because personally he's one of my favorite characters throughout the series. His story really fascinates me, and I mean, all the stories are interesting, but there's just, I feel a sort of like kinship with Perrin. So I enjoy his story, so I'm really curious as to what they do. And then it's interesting because Egwene doesn't really have a whole lot going on in this episode. And that's kind of similar in the books, where the change from Elias to the Tinkerers in this moment, Egwene is kind of in a flux state where it's just not a whole lot's going on. She's just focused on getting from point A to point B.
Right.
Which is reasonable.
I almost
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, like, it's kind of interesting to me because I feel like if we didn't have, and maybe the showrunners will eventually clear this up, but like, if we didn't have, sorry, choking, cut that out. I'm interested because I wonder if they kind of had, because I think we've talked before about how in the books Perrin didn't have a wife to kill.
Right, correct.
And I'm wondering if they gave him that almost as a reason to have us follow them with the Tinkerers, because there's like literally the last 2 episodes has just been them getting and hanging with the Tinkerers.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like, I feel like they needed some reason to focus on the Tinkerers, and I feel like having it be like he did something awful and now he has to rethink his life makes it a little more interesting than just if they were just like, here are the Tinkerers and their philosophies. Why does Perrin care? I don't know. We just need to go over it. Like, in the books, it makes sense. Like, but it's one of those things where, like, translating to TV, it's kind of like, it wouldn't make sense to look at this much.
Yeah, and I definitely think what happens in the show with Perrin and his wife is kind of serving as a replacement to the encounter with Elias Ventura. So yeah, that's kind of very similar. So the biggest divergence is Nynaeve, Lan, and Moraine being at this encampment with the Aes Sedai, and Logain being there. This is all a fabrication of the show. These events just don't occur in the book. I like seeing the connection between the Aes Sedai and the Warders, and you mentioned the polycule of 2 Warders and 1 Aes Sedai, and there seems to be like a romantic or sexual relationship going on there. So it's very common. Not all Aes Sedai get Warders. It's kind of a personal choice. And typically the Green Aja are the only Aja that have more than 1 Warder. Typically the other Ajas, they stick to having 1 companion. But the Battle Aja, for whatever reason, traditionally end up having multiple.
Thank you guys so much for listening. We will be back with episode 5 next time. We really appreciate all you guys taking the time to listen to us. We know we talk a lot and for a very long time.
I get excited.
Yes, I know. We will see you next time for episode 5. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.